My big issue with antitrust has always been the arbitrariness of market definition.
Yes.
Which I think is I think I've talked about this on the show before, but I took a class on antitrust economics in grad school, and it just seems to me that you decide what the market is, and then it's all based on market share. If you have too high of a market share, you're considered a monopoly or an oligopoly, and they break you up. But the market share depends on what the market definition is, and the market definition can be anything you want it to be, basically.
Yeah.
So it's a tool that can be very easily abused by the people in charge to punish whoever they want to punish for whatever reason.
Infamously in Europe, which of course has a much more aggressive, they regulate antitrust with an aim towards preserving competitors, not competition, and so they love to break up anything they get too big, essentially. But for example, they managed to define the market so that they could sue the crap out of I believe it was Google. It was either Google or Apple, but basically Google and Apple have the two biggest app stores. They're not the only ones, but they're the dominant ones. Yeah. And they managed to define the market in a case so narrowly that they basically construed that Google and Apple's app stores didn't compete against each other.
Okay.
And so they called one a monopoly and then fined the crap out of it for being a monopoly.
Yeah, the example I always use is Coca-Cola has a monopoly on Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
No one else is allowed to sell Coca-Cola besides Coca-Cola. But, if you define the market as cola, you have a couple competitors. If you define the market as soda, you have lots of competitors. If you define the market as non-alcoholic drinks, you have many more competitors. It just depends on how you define the market,
Same thing with Facebook. Everyone likes to talk about, people like Ken Buck and Josh Hawley like to call Facebook a monopoly, and it's like, well, yeah, it's a monopoly on being Facebook. There is no other Facebook that's competing with Facebook to be Facebook. But the social media time that people spend staring at these little devices is being divided between Facebook and Twitter and Clubhouse and TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram, which Facebook owns, and
almost exclusively YouTube for me. But
and YouTube and a universe of other competitors that haven't succeeded to the level where I'm able to pull up their name as Reddit is another huge one. If you define the market so narrowly that it's like just Facebook, they have a monopoly of that market, but people's time is finite, and they're competing for that time, and it's robust competition in that market.
Definitely.
Yeah, it would seem almost silly to say we need to create another identical Facebook to
right?
Fight.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
I only have X amount of time to spend on the one. I don't
That's when I always question when they say we need to break up companies. We have to break up Facebook into two companies. Well, what are the two companies going to do? They're both going to be Facebook? That doesn't make sense to me.
And then you're all going to migrate where your friends are. So eventually it's going to sort itself back out into a monopoly.
Right.
That's like the Robert
One
Nozick,
folded and the other's still going.
That's like the Robert Nozick thought experiment where you pick your ideal distribution of wealth and you set that, and then you let everybody do what they want to do, and then in 6 months everything is back to where it started. Because people are allowed to freely transact,
What do you say, Josh, to pivot a little bit, though? Because before the show started, we were talking how we're at a disadvantage where, and Logan hinted on it earlier, where people are very dissatisfied with the answer of just wait.
Yeah.
In the book I shared with you, Life After Google, which is written by George Gilder, who, I don't know how you classify him, a philosopher, economist,
journalist, all of them both,
everything, investor. He is definitely just wait, because it's already a broken model that's outdated. The end is near. Well, I mean, what did you think of the book? He's basically arguing that blockchain is going to outplace the Google model.
Yeah, no. To be fair, I actually have not finished the last third of the book. I got distracted, but I tend to agree with him, and I agree with him in as much as I do believe that some of these models are fairly obviously already out of date, and you can see the way the companies are behaving that acknowledge that, like the way that Google is no longer is changing the way that it uses user data, the way that Facebook is now embracing regulation. You're seeing these companies look ahead and go, but I'm not so sure that it necessarily is going to be the blockchain in particular that does this. It could be an adoption of some sort of protocols, not platforms, environment of the internet, like what folks like Tim Berners-Lee and Mike Masnick have talked about. We don't know what that future is going to be, but the one thing that we definitely can tell is that if you give it time, and if you don't set up barriers to entry, folks are going to displace these current models.